Do you believe in ghosts? I suspect you consider the mere notion of the concept as total fancy. Am I right? In any case, please attempt to cast aside any judgment as I share with you this veritable account. Perhaps, just perhaps, I should be able to enlighten your imprudent opinion. I suppose I should begin last Saturday. It was a typically quiet, early morning. I live in Asbury, North Carolina. It's a small off-the-beaten track sort of town. You know the sort of place. Its 2,000 residents live a modest, comfortable, all-American existence. It is a sort of town that is permanently, yet blissfully lost in time. I am a journalist, although less fortunate than most, as nothing really happens in this part of the world. I generally fill my column writing about the humdrum, desperately attempting to make it far more appealing than it actually is. Nevertheless, last Saturday, a very untypical series of events began to develop. It began with an unexpected early morning phone call. I had been lying there cocooned in my bed covers, and the ringing all at once shattered my blissful slumber. As I fumbled in darkness for the receiver, I glanced at the clock. 3:15. As I tried to combat the early morning fogness of my mind, I had a hard time comprehending the macabre accounts being told to me. However, I found the enticing female voice remarkably convincing, and my curiosity was aroused. Throwing on the clothes I had worn the day before, I kissed my sleeping wife softly upon her cheek and scurried downstairs. I grabbed a can of cola from the fridge and slipped out the front door into the frosty darkness and climbed into my old pickup truck. At the time of the morning, I had the freeways to myself and sped along briskly as I allowed the caffeine to jumpstart my brain. 20 minutes later, I pulled up into St. Michael's graveyard off the old highway nestled between Asbury and Gifford, the nearest neighbouring town. The graveyard and church had long been abandoned, and no one had been buried there since the 1950s, and it was completely overgrown. As I parked my truck, I was convinced that I glimpsed movement amongst the ominous assembly of overgrown, neglected gravestones. As I watched the shadow, I fancied I could perceive a figure, and I could not help to allow my keen imagination to play tricks. Perhaps as a teenager, I'd watched far too many low-budget movies at the drive-in. I apprehensively approached the Gothic-style gateway, realizing that I was trembling. As my eyes fully acclimated to the darkness, I distinguished that the movement was a person. The moon was full in the sky and gave off just enough luminosity to reveal an approaching silhouetted form. Chuckling at my jumpiness, I calmed myself, realizing that this had to be my early morning caller, Carrie. I shone my flashlight and waved. On the phone, she had shared with me the rather disturbing fact that she claimed herself to be a witch, or rather a former witch, and despite the sweetness in her tone, I was still envisioning some sort of a hideous, squat, warp-covered hag. I was pleasantly surprised when a shapely young nubile female came fully into my view. With a smile, she confirmed that she was indeed Carrie. I could tell instantly that she was distraught, as fear seemed deeply embedded within her intense cobalt eyes. She wasted no time in leading me through the overgrown cemetery to the mausoleum in the centre. Walking a couple of steps behind her, I became captivated by the flow of her long, raven black hair. We approached the old building. In sharp contrast to the decaying stones placed all about it, the brick stones in its construction belied its 100-year-old history. It had been built in the turn of the 20th century, back when the city was wealthy and grand, and Asbury's most affluent of residents required equal grandeur and depth. Carrie pushed against its old cast-iron door. Its screeching hinge wailed like the torturous cry of a banshee as it opened. Carrie entered. I hesitated for a moment, beginning to reconsider my actions, but Carrie's captivating smile gave me newfound daring, and I followed her, and down a steep set of steps. The room at the bottom was filled with black candles, dozens of them, and they illuminated the space with an amazing radiance. I began to eagerly inspect every nook in only way that a reporter's eye could. The first thing that struck me was its size, as it was amazingly cavernous, leading down well below the surface. I realized that there must be a multitude of tunnels down here, each one filled with tombs going down deep into the earth. Reason was still nagging at me to scurry home, back to the security of my warm bed. Yet as I mentioned, Carrie had by some means bewitched me, and besides, this is going to make one hell of a column. I continued to examine the burial chamber and came across a large slab of rock. This made me shudder down to my very core, as the vestiges of several creatures were strewn about, and they had been so brutally slaughtered that defining what kind of animals they were was virtually impossible. The sweet sickly scent told me that this callousness had been recent. The blood was still fresh. In the centre of the room, several strange figures had been drawn in blood. I began fervently shooting images. As I snapped, Carrie continued. She explained how it all began, naively enough, with a few bored high school friends. There was little excitement for teenagers in this town. One of them had purchased an old book of black arts on the internet. At first it'd all been a giggle, she added with a strange smile. Soon the 7 of them had formed a coven. It was all innocent fun, well at first she told me, but as the months and years progressed, so did their involvement.